Yes, 10 years. The courtships last 10 years. And is it, after all, too long when the being bound for life is in consideration? One studies 10 years to become an engineer or physician, an advocate or attorney, and should less time be spent in acquiring the knowledge to make a good husband? Is it not reasonable? And whether due to temperament or reason with them, the Quiquendonians seem to us to be in the right, in thus prolonging their courtship. When marriages in other more lively and excitable cities are seen taking place within a few months, we must shrug our shoulders and hasten to send our boys to the schools and our daughters to the pensions of Quiquendone. For half a century, but a single marriage was known to have taken place after the lapse of 2 years only of courtship, and that turned out badly. Franz Niklas then loved Suzel van Tricus, but quietly, as a man would love when he has 10 years before him in which to obtain the beloved object. Once every week, at an hour agreed upon, Franz went to fetch Suzel and took a walk with her along the banks of the Var. He took good care to carry his fishing tackle, and Suzel never forgot her canvas, on which her pretty hands embroidered the most unlikely flowers. Franz was a young man of 22, whose cheeks betrayed a soft, peachy down, and whose voice had scarcely a compass of 1 octave. As for Suzel, she was blonde and rosy. She was 17 and did not dislike fishing. A singular occupation this, however, which forces you to struggle craftily with a barbel, but Franz loved it. The pastime was congenial to his temperament. As patient as possible, content to follow with his rather dreamy eye the cork which bobbed on the top of the water, he knew how to wait. And when, after sitting for 6 hours, a modest barbel, taking pity on him, consented at last to be caught, he was happy, but he knew how to control his emotion. On this day the two lovers, one might say, the two betrothed, were seated upon the verdant bank. The limpid Var murmured a few feet below them. Suzel quietly drew her needle across the canvas. Franz automatically carried his line from left to right, then permitted it to descend the current from right to left. The fish made capricious rings in the water, which crossed each other around the cork, while the hook hung useless near the bottom. From time to time, Franz would say, without raising his eyes, "I think I have a bite, Suzel." "Do you think so, Franz?" replied Suzel, who, abandoning her work for an instant, followed her lover's line with earnest eye. "No," resumed Franz, "I thought I felt a little twitch. I was mistaken." "You will have a bite, Franz," replied Suzel in her pure, soft voice, "but do not forget to strike at the right moment. You are always a few seconds too late, and the barbel takes advantage to escape." "Would you like to take my line, Suzel?" "Willingly, Franz." "Then give me your canvas. We shall see whether I am more adroit with the needle than with the hook." And the young girl took the line with trembling hand, while her swain plied the needle across the stitches of the embroidery. For hours together they thus exchanged soft words, and their hearts palpitated when the cork bobbed on the water. Ah, could they ever forget those charming hours, during which, seated side by side, they listened to the murmurs of the river. The young girl took the line. The sun was fast approaching the western horizon, and despite the combined skill of Suzel and Franz, there had not been a bite. The barbels had not shown themselves complacent, and seemed to scoff at the two young people, who were too just to bear them malice. "We shall be more lucky another time, Franz," said Suzel, as the young angler put up his still virgin hook. "Let us hope so," replied Franz. Then, walking side by side, they turned their steps towards the house, without exchanging a word, as mute as their shadows which stretched out before them. Suzel became very, very tall under the oblique rays of the setting sun. Franz appeared very, very thin, like the long rod which he held in his hand. They reached the burgomaster's house. Green tufts of grass bordered the shining pavement, and no one would have thought of tearing them away, for they deadened the noise made by the passers-by. As they were about to open the door, Franz thought it his duty to say to Suzel, "You know, Suzel, the great day is approaching." "It is indeed, Franz," replied the young girl with downcast eyes. "Yes," said Franz, "in 5 or 6 years." "Goodbye, Franz," said Suzel. "Goodbye, France," said Suzel. "Goodbye, Suzel," replied France. And after the door had been closed, the young man resumed the way to his father's house with a calm and equal pace. Chapter 7, in which the andantes become allegros and the allegros vivaces. The agitation caused by the Schutt and Custos affair had subsided. The affair led to no serious consequences. It appeared likely that Quiquendone would return to its habitual apathy, which that unexpected event had for a moment disturbed. Meanwhile, the laying of the pipes destined to conduct the oxyhydric gas into the principal edifices of the town was proceeding rapidly. The main pipes and branches gradually crept beneath the pavements, but the burners were still wanting, for, as it required delicate skill to make them, it was necessary that they should be fabricated abroad. Dr. Ox was here, there, and everywhere. Neither he nor Ygine, his assistant, lost a moment, but they urged on the workmen, completed the delicate mechanism of the gasometer, fed day and night the immense piles which decomposed the water under the influence of a powerful electric current. Yes, the doctor was already making his gas, though the pipe-laying was not yet done, a fact which, between ourselves, might have seemed a little singular. But before long, at least there was reason to hope so, before long Dr. Ox would inaugurate the splendors of his invention in the theatre of the town. For Quiquendone possessed a theatre, a really fine edifice, in truth, the interior and exterior arrangement of which combined every style of architecture. It was at once Byzantine, Roman, Gothic, Renaissance, with semicircular doors, pointed windows, flamboyant rose windows, fantastic bell turrets. In a word, a specimen of all sorts, half a Parthenon, half a Parisian Grand Café. Nor was this surprising, the theatre having been commenced under the burgomaster Ludwig van Trichas in 1175, and only finished in 1837 under the burgomaster Natalies van Trichas. It had required 700 years to build it, and it had been successively adapted to the architectural style in vogue in each period. But for all that it was an imposing structure, the Roman pillars and Byzantine arches of which would appear to advantage lit up by the oxyhydric gas. Pretty well everything was acted at the theatre of Quiquendone, but the opera and the opera comique were especially patronized. It must, however, be added that the composers would never have recognized their own works, so entirely changed were the movements of the music. In short, as nothing was done in a hurry at Quiquendone, the dramatic pieces had to be performed in harmony with the peculiar temperament of the Quiquendonians. Though the doors of the theatre were regularly thrown open at 4 o'clock and closed again at 10, it had never been known that more than 2 acts were played during the 6 intervening hours. Robert le Diable, Les Huguenots, or Guillaume Tell usually took up 3 evenings, so slow was the execution of these masterpieces. The vivaces at the theatre of Quiquendone lagged like real adagios. The allegros were long drawn out, indeed. The demi-semiquavers were scarcely equal to the ordinary semibreves of other countries. The most rapid runs, performed according to Quiquendonian taste, had the solemn march of a chant. The gayest shakes were languishing and measured, that they might not shock the ears of the dilettanti. To give an example, the rapid air sung by Figaro on his entrance in the first act of Le Barbier de Seville lasted 58 minutes, when the actor was particularly enthusiastic. Artists from abroad, as might be supposed, were forced to conform themselves to Quiquendonian fashions, but as they were well paid, they did not complain, and willingly obeyed the leader's baton, which never beat more than 8 measures to the minute in the allegros. But what applause greeted these artists, who enchanted without ever wearying the audiences of Quiquendone. All hands clapped one after another at tolerably long intervals, which the papers characterized as frantic applause, and sometimes nothing but the lavish prodigality with which mortar and stone had been used in the 12th century saved the roof of the hall from falling in. Besides, the theatre had only 1 performance a week, that these enthusiastic Flemish folk might not be too much excited, and this enabled the actors to study their parts more thoroughly, and the spectators to digest more at leisure the beauties of the masterpieces brought out. Such had long been the drama at Quiquendone. Foreign artists were in the habit of making engagements with the director of the town when they wanted to rest after their exertions in other scenes, and it seemed as if nothing could ever change these inveterate customs when, a fortnight after the Shut Custos affair, an unlooked-for incident occurred to throw the population into fresh agitation. It was on a Saturday, an opera day. It was not yet intended, as may well be supposed, to inaugurate the new illumination. No, the pipes had reached the hole, but, for reasons indicated above, the burners had not yet been placed, and the wax candles still shed their soft light upon the numerous spectators who filled the theater. The doors had been opened to the public at 1 o'clock, and by 3 the hall was half full. A queue had at one time been formed, which extended as far as the end of the place St. Ernulf, in front of the shop of Jos Liatrink, the apothecary. This eagerness was significant of an unusually attractive performance. "Are you going to the theater this evening?" inquired the councillor the same morning of the burgomaster. "I shall not fail to do so," returned Van Tricasse, "and I shall take Madame Van Tricasse, as well as our daughter Suzel and our dear Tatimans, who all dote on good music." "Mademoiselle Suzel is going then?" "Certainly, Nicolas." "Then my son France will be one of the first to arrive," said Nicolas. "A spirited boy, Nicolas," replied the burgomaster sententiously, "but hot-headed. He will require watching." "He loves Van Tricasse. He loves your charming Suzel." "Well, Nicolas, he shall marry her. Now that we have agreed on this marriage, what more can he desire?" "He desires nothing, Van Tricasse, the dear boy, but in short, we'll say no more about it, he will not be the last to get his ticket at the box office." "Ah, vivacious and ardent youth," replied the burgomaster, recalling his own past. "We have also been thus, my worthy councillor. We have loved, we too. We have danced attendance in our day. Till tonight then, till tonight. By the by, do you know this Fiovaranti is a great artist, and what a welcome he has received among us. It will be long before he will forget the applause of Quiquendone." The tenor Fiovaranti was, indeed, going to sing. Fiovaranti, who, by his talents as a virtuoso, his perfect method, his melodious voice, provoked a real enthusiasm among the lovers of music in the town. For 3 weeks Fiovaranti had been achieving a brilliant success in Les Huguenots. The first act, interpreted according to the taste of the Quiquendonians, had occupied an entire evening of the first week of the month. Another evening in the second week, prolonged by infinite andantes, had elicited for the celebrated singer a real ovation. His success had been still more marked in the third act of Meyerbeer's masterpiece. But now Fiovaranti was to appear in the fourth act, which was to be performed on this evening before an impatient public. Ah, the duet between Raoul and Valentine, that pathetic love song for two voices, that strain so full of crescendos, stringendos, and più crescendos, all this, sung slowly, compendiously, interminably. Ah, how delightful! Fiovaranti had been achieving a brilliant success in Les Huguenots. At 4 o'clock the hall was full. The boxes, the orchestra, the pit were overflowing. In the front stalls sat the burgomaster Van Tricasse, Mademoiselle Van Tricasse, Madame Van Tricasse, and the amiable Tatimans in a green bonnet. Not far off were the councillor Nicolas and his family, not forgetting the amorous France. The families of Custos the doctor, of Schutt the advocate, of Honor Syntax the chief judge, of Norbert Sontman the insurance director, of the banker Collert, gone mad on German music, and himself somewhat of an amateur, and the teacher Rupp, and the master of the academy, Jerome Resch, and the civil commissary, and so many other notabilities of the town that they could not be enumerated here without wearying the reader's patience, were visible in different parts of the hall. It was customary for the Quiquendonians, while awaiting the rise of the curtain, to sit silent, some reading the paper, others whispering low to each other, some making their way to their seats slowly and noiselessly, others casting timid looks towards the bewitching beauties in the galleries. But on this evening, a looker-on might have observed that, even before the curtain rose, there was unusual animation among the audience. People were restless who were never known to be restless before. The ladies' fans fluttered with abnormal rapidity. All appeared to be inhaling air of exceptional stimulating power. Everyone breathed more freely. The eyes of some became unwontedly bright and seemed to give forth a light equal to that of the candles, which themselves certainly threw a more brilliant light over the whole. It was evident that people saw more clearly, though the number of candles had not been increased. Ah, if Dr. Ox's experiment were being tried, but it was not being tried as yet. The musicians of the orchestra at last took their places. The first violin had gone to the stand to give a modest la to his colleagues. The stringed instruments, the wind instruments, the drums and cymbals were in accord. The conductor only waited the sound of the bell to beat the first bar. The bell sounds. The fourth act begins. The allegro appassionato of the interact is played as usual, with a majestic deliberation which would have made Meyerbeer frantic, and all the majesty of which was appreciated by the Quiquendonian dilettanti. But soon the leader perceived that he was no longer master of his musicians. He found it difficult to restrain them, though usually so obedient and calm. The wind instruments betrayed a tendency to hasten the movements, and it was necessary to hold them back with a firm hand, for they would otherwise outstrip the stringed instruments, which, from a musical point of view, would have been disastrous. The bassoon himself, the son of Jos Liatrink the apothecary, a well-bred young man, seemed to lose his self-control. Meanwhile Valentine has begun her recitative, I am alone, etc., but she hurries it. Leader and all his musicians, perhaps unconsciously, follow her in her cantabile, which should be taken deliberately, like a 12/8 as it is. When Raoul appears at the door at the bottom of the stage, between the moment when Valentine goes to him and that when she conceals herself in the chamber at the side, a quarter of an hour does not elapse, while formerly, according to the traditions of the Quiquendone theatre, this recitative of 37 bars was wont to last just 37 minutes. Saint Brice, Nevers, Caverns, and the Catholic nobles have appeared, somewhat prematurely, perhaps, upon the scene. The composer has marked allegro pomposo on the score. The orchestra and the lords proceed allegro indeed, but not at all pomposo, and at the chorus, in the famous scene of the benediction of the poniards, they no longer keep to the enjoined allegro. Singers and musicians broke away impetuously. The leader does not even attempt to restrain them, nor do the public protest. On the contrary, the people find themselves carried away and see that they are involved in the movement, and that the movement responds to the impulses of their souls. Will you, with me, deliver the land from troubles increasing, an impious band? They promise, they swear. Nevers has scarcely time to protest and to sing that among his ancestors were many soldiers, but never an assassin. He is arrested. The police and the older men rush forward and rapidly swear to strike all at once. Saint Brice shouts the recitative, which summons the Catholics to vengeance. The three monks with white scarfs hasten in by the door at the back of Nevers' room without making any account of the stage directions, which enjoin on them to advance slowly. Already all the artists have drawn sword or poniard, which the three monks bless in a trice. The soprani tenors, bassos, attack the allegro furioso with cries of rage, and of a dramat/8 time, they make it 6/8 quadrille time. Then they rush out, bellowing. At midnight. Noiselessly. God wills it. Yes. At midnight. At this moment the audience start to their feet. Everybody is agitated in the boxes, the pit, the galleries. It seems as if the spectators are about to rush upon the stage, the burgomaster Van Trichas at their head, to join with the conspirators and annihilate the Huguenots, whose religious opinions, however, they share. They applaud, call before the curtain, make loud acclamations. Tatinmans grasps her bonnet with feverish hand. The candles throw out a lurid glow of light. Raoul, instead of slowly raising the curtain, tears it apart with a superb gesture and finds himself confronting Valentine. At last, it is the grand duet, and it starts off allegro vivace. Raoul does not wait for Valentine's pleading, and Valentine does not wait for Raoul's responses. The fine passage beginning, danger is passing, time is flying, becomes one of those rapid airs which have made Offenbach famous when he composes a dance for conspirators. The andante amoroso, thou hast said it, I thou lovest me, becomes a real vivace furioso, and the violoncello ceases to imitate the inflections of the singer's voice, as indicated in the composer's score. In vain Raoul cries, "Speak on, and prolong the ineffable slumber of my soul." Valentine cannot prolong. It is evident that an unaccustomed fire devours her. Her B's and her C's above the stave were dreadfully shrill. He struggles, he gesticulates, he is all in a glow. The alarum is heard, the bell resounds, but what a panting bell! The bell-ringer has evidently lost his self-control. It is a frightful tocsin, which violently struggles against the fury of the orchestra. Finally, the air which ends this magnificent act, beginning, "No more love, no more intoxication, oh the remorse that oppresses me," which the composer marks allegro con modo, becomes a wild prestissimo. You would say an express train was whirling by. The alarum resounds again. Valentine falls fainting. Raoul precipitates himself from the window. It was high time. The orchestra, really intoxicated, could not have gone on. The leader's baton is no longer anything but a broken stick on the prompter's box. The violin strings are broken and their necks twisted. In his fury, the drummer has burst his drum. The counterbassist has perched on the top of his musical monster. The first clarionet has swallowed the reed of his instrument, and the second hautboy is chewing his reed keys. The groove of the trombone is strained, and finally, the unhappy cornist cannot withdraw his hand from the bell of his horn, into which he had thrust it too far. And the audience, panting, all in a heat, gesticulates and howls. All the faces are as red as if a fire were burning within their bodies. They crowd each other, hustle each other to get out, the men without hats, the women without mantles. They elbow each other in the corridors, crush between the doors, quarrel, fight. There are no longer any officials, any burgomaster. All are equal amid this infernal frenzy. They hustle each other to get out. Some moments after, when all have reached the street, each one resumes his habitual tranquility and peaceably enters his house, with a confused remembrance of what he has just experienced. The fourth act of the Huguenots, which formerly lasted 6 hours, began on this evening at 4:30 and ended at 12 minutes before 5. It had only lasted 18 minutes. Chapter 8, in which the ancient and solemn German waltz becomes a whirlwind. But if the spectators, on leaving the theater, resumed their customary calm, if they quietly regained their homes, preserving only a sort of passing stupefaction, they had none the less undergone a remarkable exaltation, and overcome and weary, as if they had committed some excess of dissipation, they fell heavily upon their beds. The next day each Quiquendonian had a kind of recollection of what had occurred the evening before. One missed his hat, lost in the hubbub, another a coat flap, torn in the brawl, one her delicately fashioned shoe, another her best mantle. Memory returned to these worthy people, and with it a certain shame for their unjustifiable agitation. It seemed to them an orgy in which they were the unconscious heroes and heroines. They did not speak of it, they did not wish to think of it, but the most astounded personage in the town was Van Tricasse, the burgomaster. The next morning, on waking, he could not find his wig. Lotch looked everywhere for it, but in vain. The wig had remained on the field of battle. As for having it publicly claimed by Jean Mistral, the town crier, no, it would not do. It were better to lose the wig than to advertise himself thus, as he had the honor to be the first magistrate of Quiquendone. The worthy Van Tricasse was reflecting upon this, extended beneath his sheets, with bruised body, heavy head, furred tongue, and burning breast. He felt no desire to get up, on the contrary, and his brain worked more during this morning than it had probably worked before for 40 years. The worthy magistrate recalled to his mind all the incidents of the incomprehensible performance. He connected them with the events which had taken place shortly before at Dr. Ox's reception. He tried to discover the causes of the singular excitability which, on 2 occasions, had betrayed itself in the best citizens of the town. What can be going on? He asked himself. What giddy spirit has taken possession of my peaceable town of Quiquendone? Are we about to go mad, and must we make the town one vast asylum? For yesterday we were all there, notables, councillors, judges, advocates, physicians, schoolmasters, and ale, if my memory serves me, all of us were assailed by this excess of furious folly. But what was there in that infernal music? It is inexplicable, yet I certainly ate or drank nothing which could put me into such a state. No, yesterday I had for dinner a slice of overdone veal, several spoonfuls of spinach with sugar, eggs, and a little beer and water. That couldn't get into my head. No, there is something that I cannot explain, and as after all I am responsible for the conduct of the citizens, I will have an investigation. But the investigation, though decided upon by the municipal council, produced no result. If the facts were clear, the causes escaped the sagacity of the magistrates. Besides, tranquility had been restored in the public mind, and with tranquility, forgetfulness of the strange scenes of the theatre. The newspapers avoided speaking of them, and the account of the performance which appeared in the Quiquendone Memorial made no allusion to this intoxication of the entire audience. Meanwhile, though the town resumed its habitual phlegm and became apparently Flemish as before, it was observable that, at bottom, the character and temperament of the people changed little by little. One might have truly said, with Dominique Custos, the doctor, that their nerves were affected. Let us explain. This undoubted change only took place under certain conditions. When the Quiquendonians passed through the streets of the town, walked in the squares, or along the Var, they were always the cold and methodical people of former days. So too when they remained at home, some working with their hands and others with their heads, these doing nothing, those thinking nothing, their private life was silent, inert, vegetating as before. No quarrels, no household squabbles, no acceleration in the beating of the heart, no excitement of the brain. The mean of their pulsations remained as it was of old, from 50 to 52 per minute. But strange and inexplicable phenomenon though it was, which would have defied the sagacity of the most ingenious physiologists of the day, if the inhabitants of Quiquendone did not change in their home life, they were visibly changed in their civil life, and in their relations between man and man, to which it leads. If they met together in some public edifice, it did not work well, as Commissary Passoff expressed it. On change at the town hall, in the amphitheater of the academy, at the sessions of the council, as well as at the reunions of the savants, a strange excitement seized the assembled citizens. Their relations with each other became embarrassing before they had been together an hour. In 2 hours, the discussion degenerated into an angry dispute. Heads became heated, and personalities were used. Even at church, during the sermon, the faithful could not listen to Van Stabel, the minister, in patience, and he threw himself about in the pulpit and lectured his flock with far more than his usual severity. At last this state of things brought about altercations more grave, alas, than that between Gustos and Schutt, and if they did not require the interference of the authorities, it was because the antagonists, after returning home, found there, with its calm, forgetfulness of the offenses offered and received. This peculiarity could not be observed by these minds, which were absolutely incapable of recognizing what was passing in them. One person only in the town, he whose office the council had thought of suppressing for 30 years, Michael Passoff, had remarked that this excitement, which was absent from private houses, quickly revealed itself in public edifices, and he asked himself, not without a certain anxiety, what would happen if this infection should ever develop itself in the family mansions, and if the epidemic, this was the word he used, should extend through the streets of the town. Then there would be no more forgetfulness of insults, no more tranquility, no intermission in the delirium, but a permanent inflammation, which would inevitably bring the Quiquendonians into collision with each other. What would happen then? Commissary Passoff asked himself in terror. How could these furious savages be arrested? How check these goaded temperaments? My office would be no longer a sinecure, and the council would be obliged to double my salary unless it should arrest me myself for disturbing the public peace. These very reasonable fears began to be realized. The infection spread from change, the theater, the church, the town hall, the academy, the market, into private houses, and that in less than a fortnight after the terrible performance of the Huguenots. Its first symptoms appeared in the house of Collert, the banker. That wealthy personage gave a ball, or at least a dancing party, to the notabilities of the town. He had issued, some months before, a loan of 30,000 francs 3/4 of which had been subscribed, and to celebrate this financial success, he had opened his drawing rooms and given a party to his fellow citizens. Everybody knows that Flemish parties are innocent and tranquil enough, the principal expense of which is usually in beer and syrups. Some conversation on the weather, the appearance of the crops, the fine condition of the gardens, the care of flowers, and especially of tulips. A slow and measured dance, from time to time, perhaps a minuet, sometimes a waltz, but one of those German waltzes which achieve a turn and a half per minute, and during which the dancers hold each other as far apart as their arms will permit. Such is the usual fashion of the balls attended by the aristocratic society of Quiquendone. The polka, after being altered to 4/time, had tried to become accustomed to it, but the dancers always lagged behind the orchestra, no matter how slow the measure, and it had to be abandoned. These peaceable reunions, in which the youths and maidens enjoyed an honest and moderate pleasure, had never been attended by any outburst of ill nature. Why then, on this evening at Collert the banker's, did the syrups seem to be transformed into heady wines, into sparkling champagne, into heating punches? Why, towards the middle of the evening, did a sort of mysterious intoxication take possession of the guests? Why did the minuet become a jig? Why did the orchestra hurry with its harmonies? Why did the candles, just as at the theatre, burn with unwonted refulgence? What electric current invaded the banker's drawing rooms? How happened it that the couples held each other so closely and clasped each other's hands so convulsively that the cavalier Sewells made themselves conspicuous by certain extraordinary steps in that figure usually so grave, so solemn, so majestic, so very proper? Alas, what Oedipus could have answered these unsolvable questions? Commissary Passoff, who was present at the party, saw the storm coming distinctly, but he could not control it or fly from it, and he felt a kind of intoxication entering his own brain. All his physical and emotional faculties increased in intensity. He was seen, several times, to throw himself upon the confectionery and devour the dishes, as if he had just broken a long fast. The animation of the ball was increasing all this while. A long murmur, like a dull buzzing, escaped from all breasts. They danced, really danced. The feet were agitated by increasing frenzy. The faces became as purple as those of Silenus. The eyes shone like carbuncles. The general fermentation rose to the highest pitch. And when the orchestra thundered out the waltz in Der Freischütz, when this waltz, so German, and with a movement so slow, was attacked with wild arms by the musicians, it was no longer a waltz, but an insensate whirlwind, a giddy rotation, a gyration worthy of being led by some Mephistopheles, beating the measure with a firebrand. Then a gallop, an infernal gallop, which lasted an hour without anyone being able to stop it, whirled off, in its windings, across the halls, the drawing rooms, the antechambers, by the staircases, from the cellar to the garret of the opulent mansion. The young men and young girls, the fathers and mothers, people of every age, of every weight of both sexes, Collert, the fat banker, and Madame Collert, and the councillors, and the magistrates, and the Chief Justice, and Nicklaus, and Madame Van Trikas, and the Burgomaster Van Trikas, and the Commissary Passoff himself, who never could recall afterwards who had been his partner on that terrible evening. It was no longer a waltz. But she did not forget, and ever since that day she has seen in her dreams the fiery commissary enfolding her in an impassioned embrace, and she was the amiable Tatimans. Chapter 9, in which Dr. Ox and Ygine, his assistant, say a few words. Well, Ygine. Well, master, all is ready. The laying of the pipes is finished. At last, now then, we are going to operate on a large scale on the masses. Chapter 10, in which it will be seen that the epidemic invades the entire town and what effect it produces. During the following months, the evil, in place of subsiding, became more extended. From private houses, the epidemic spread into the streets. The town of Quiquendone was no longer to be recognized. A phenomenon yet stranger than those which had already happened now appeared. Not only the animal kingdom, but the vegetable kingdom itself became subject to the mysterious influence. According to the ordinary course of things, epidemics are special in their operation. Those which attack humanity spare the animals, and those which attack the animals spare the vegetables. A horse was never inflicted with smallpox, nor a man with the cattle plague, nor do sheep suffer from the potato rot. But here all the laws of nature seem to be overturned. Not only were the character, temperament, and ideas of the townsfolk changed, but the domestic animals, dogs and cats, horses and cows, asses and goats, suffered from this epidemic influence, as if their habitual equilibrium had been changed. The plants themselves were infected by a similar strange metamorphosis. In the gardens and vegetable patches and orchards, very curious symptoms manifested themselves. Climbing plants climbed more audaciously, tufted plants became more tufted than ever, shrubs became trees. Cereals scarcely sown showed their little green heads and gained in the same length of time as much in inches as formerly. Under the most favorable circumstances, they had gained in fractions. Asparagus attained the height of several feet. The artichokes swelled to the size of melons, the melons to the size of pumpkins, the pumpkins to the size of gourds, the gourds to the size of the belfry bell, which measured, in truth, 9 feet in diameter. The cabbages were bushes, and the mushrooms umbrellas. The fruits did not lag behind the vegetables. It required 2 persons to eat a strawberry and 4 to consume a pear. The grapes also attained the enormous proportions of those so well depicted by Poussin in his Return of the Envoys to the Promised Land. It required 2 persons to eat a strawberry. It was the same with the flowers. Immense violets spread the most penetrating perfumes through the air. Exaggerated roses shone with the brightest colors. Lilies formed, in a few days, impenetrable copses. Geraniums, daisies, camellias, rhododendrons invaded the garden walks and stifled each other. And the tulips, those dear liliaceous plants so dear to the Flemish heart, what emotion they must have caused to their zealous cultivators. The worthy Van Beestrom nearly fell over backwards one day on seeing in his garden an enormous Chalipa gesneriana, a gigantic monster, whose cup afforded space to a nest for a whole family of robins. The entire town flocked to see this floral phenomenon and renamed it the Chalipa quiquendonia. But alas, if these plants, these fruits, these flowers grew visibly to the naked eye, if all the vegetables insisted on assuming colossal proportions, if the brilliancy of their colors and perfume intoxicated the smell and the sight, they quickly withered. The air which they absorbed rapidly exhausted them, and they soon died, faded, and dried up. Such was the fate of the famous tulip, which, after several days of splendor, became emaciated and fell lifeless. It was soon the same with the domestic animals, from the house-dog to the stable pig, from the canary in its cage to the turkey of the back court. It must be said that in ordinary times these animals were not less phlegmatic than their masters. The dogs and cats vegetated rather than lived. They never betrayed a wag of pleasure nor a snarl of wrath. Their tails moved no more than if they had been made of bronze. Such a thing as a bite or scratch from any of them had not been known from time immemorial. As for mad dogs, they were looked upon as imaginary beasts, like the griffins and the rest in the menagerie of the apocalypse. But what a change had taken place in a few months, the smallest incidents of which we are trying to reproduce. Dogs and cats began to show teeth and claws. Several executions had taken place after reiterated offenses. A horse was seen, for the first time, to take his bit in his teeth and rush through the streets of Quiquendone. An ox was observed to precipitate itself, with lowered horns, upon one of his herd. An ass was seen to turn himself ever, with his legs in the air, in the place Saint Ernuph, and bray as ass never brayed before. A sheep, actually a sheep, defended valiantly the cutlets within him from the butcher's knife. Van Trijkas, the burgomaster, was forced to make police regulations concerning the domestic animals. As seized with lunacy, they rendered the streets of Quiquendone unsafe. But alas, if the animals were mad, the men were scarcely less so. No age was spared by the scourge. Babies soon became quite insupportable, though till now so easy to bring up, and for the first time on our syntax, the judge was obliged to apply the rod to his youthful offspring. There was a kind of insurrection at the high school, and the dictionaries became formidable missiles in the classes. The scholars would not submit to be shut in, and besides, the infection took the teachers themselves, who overwhelmed the boys and girls with extravagant tasks and punishments. Another strange phenomenon occurred. All these Quiquendonians, so sober before, whose chief food had been whipped creams, committed wild excesses in their eating and drinking. Their usual regimen no longer sufficed. Each stomach was transformed into a gulf, and it became necessary to fill this gulf by the most energetic means. The consumption of the town was trebled. Instead of 2 repasts, they had 6. Many cases of indigestion were reported. The councillor Niklaus could not satisfy his hunger. Van Trichas found it impossible to assuage his thirst and remained in a state of rabid semi-intoxication. In short, the most alarming symptoms manifested themselves and increased from day to day. Drunken people staggered in the streets, and these were often citizens of high position. Dominique Custos, the physician, had plenty to do with the heartburns, inflammations, and nervous affections, which proved to what a strange degree the nerves of the people had been irritated. There were daily quarrels and altercations in the once deserted but now crowded streets of Quiquendone, for nobody could any longer stay at home. It was necessary to establish a new police force to control the disturbers of the public peace. A prison cage was established in the town hall and speedily became full, night and day, of refractory offenders. Commissary Passoff was in despair. A marriage was concluded in less than 2 months. Such a thing had never been seen before. Yes, the son of Rupp, the schoolmaster, wedded the daughter of Augustine de Rover, and that 57 days only after he had petitioned for her hand and heart. Other marriages were decided upon, which, in old times, would have remained in doubt and discussion for years. The burgomaster perceived that his own daughter, the charming Suzel, was escaping from his hands. As for dear Tattimans, she had dared to sound Commissary Passoff on the subject of a union, which seemed to her to combine every element of happiness, fortune, honor, youth. At last, to reach the depths of abomination, a duel took place. Yes, a duel with pistols, horse pistols, at 75 paces, with ball cartridges, and between whom our readers will never believe. Between M. Franz Niklaus, the gentle angler, and young Simon Carlert, the wealthy banker's son. And the cause of this duel was the burgomaster's daughter, for whom Simon discovered himself to be fired with passion, and whom he refused to yield to the claims of an audacious rival. Chapter 11.